Hello and welcome to Our Game here on this fine Monday afternoon. I'm with Naoise Waldron. Naoise, we've had a fair bit of lovely weather in Italy, Croatia, and Slovenia the last week and a half. What's it been like here in Ireland while I was away?
It was grand now. I nearly didn't recognise you there with a shirt on.
Without this hat as well.
Oh, cheers, the butcher's hat.
Yeah, that I was sporting around the Adriatic.
There's an old sirloin hanging there now.
A few lamb shanks as well to go with it. But we had a huge weekend at GAA. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We're going to have Fintan O'Toole, the 42, on a little bit later on. There's so much to talk about in both codes. But the first thing, just a reminder, we're brought to you by OurGame.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off. There's a huge range of jerseys, including this beautiful Clare one, not to mention an absolute brilliant range of jerseys across the board. So go to OurGame.com, use the promo code OurGame. I'm going to start off with a couple of comments before we dive into the likes of the Waterford Championship. But I suppose Pádraig Gill comes in here with TG Cahir obviously do a phenomenal job, goes without saying, but why on earth did they go with the Waterford Hurling Championship yesterday? It's one of the least competitive going. And Jack Nulty says, maybe with the All-Ireland champions, Pádraig, but agree, not competitive. I suppose, look, Naoise, you were there for TG Cahir doing sideline analysis, and I'll just give the results from yesterday and then also from Saturday in the quarterfinals. So Ballygunner 127, 4 Mile Water 115, 46 games unbeaten for Ballygunner. Mount Sion 127, Lismore 13 points there, so pretty one-sided. And then on Saturday, Rowan Moore beat Abbeyside and De La Salle saw off Dungarvan. Those games were a little bit closer. But you've played in the Waterford Championship for Ballygunner. You know what it's like down there. You were down there for TG Cahir. Was it as one-sided as all of that?
The first game definitely was. First about kind of 15 minutes, I actually thought, I was like, geez, there's more hanging around here now. They're actually making a game of this. The way they were playing was good, where they were against the wind and they had Ray Barry back and they were kind of trying to run the ball and work the ball and then win frees. But then you see, when you're missing Maurice Shanahan, one of the best free takers in the country. I mean, like Maurice is worth, between 12 and 15 points a game for Lismore, and there's just no other way around it. And Jack Pendergast on the frees, and he missed a few in the first half. And when they needed, like in the first half especially, they really needed every score that they had a chance to get, which wasn't happening. And then basically Aussie Gleeson got the 21-yard free. And just myself and McDarragh were kind of joking, and I just kind of said, look, if I was Austin, I think I'd actually go for this. And he blasted it into net, because in far field they have this kind of Astro goal mouth. So I thought, right, just try bounce it, but he didn't. He just blasted it into the side net, and it was a bullet. It was a great goal. And then that really, it put it 1-6-3, and then it just kind of, Lismore never kind of pushed up. Ray Barry was sitting back the whole time, but then Dan Shannon had to start full forward. And there was no one around him either to get onto breaks. He was too isolated. And Stephen O'Neill, playing centre back there for Mount Sion, just sat back. And I'd say he nearly had a hole in his hurl from pucking the ball. He was on the sitter all the time. He was himself and Martin Fish O'Neill beside him. The whole half back line, they just took over the game from Mount Sion. Two lads midfield, Evan Curran and Stephen Roach, or Midget as he's known as. They were unreal. Now, Midget went down with a busted knee at the end of the game, but he walked across the field and seemed to only be kind of limping. So hopefully he's back. But Mount Sion were, they look far fitter than I've seen them in a while. They have a really good style of play, but they hit 17 wides and missed a few goal chances. Kind of a few of their points were they were obviously going for goals and they just blasted and kind of crossed the crossbar by an inch or two or whatever. So they'll need to be far more clinical going forward. If they have any chance of trying to win a county again,
Yeah, and maybe there's a chance that because they were running away with the game, was never really in doubt, that you take the foot off the pedal, you hit those wides. For Lismore, though, the two dailies, they haven't been fully fit. They've obviously been carrying injuries, so they're not at 100%. And then you mentioned Dan Shannon, he's 45, he's still out there doing his stuff for them, but you're talking about him being isolated. So very difficult for a 21-year-old who's full of beans to be running around chasing defenders when they're outnumbered, never mind the 45-year-old.
Yeah, he was in an impossible situation, really, right? Because it was against the wind with a sweeper and him on his own. So it's kind of right, geez, like you said, you'd want to be the most energetic player, the fittest player, and probably 23 or 4, maybe, or 27, whatever in your prime, to be getting around to even have a hope. And ideally, all you'd really be hoping for is to win the ball, hold it up, maybe win a free, or somebody comes with you. But they were suffering, like they couldn't get in and around. Even once or twice in the second half, Jack Prendergast won a couple of balls up in the forwards, and he'd win it out in the corner with a good pass in and on. He'd look up and no one was running through the middle for a pass across. Like and it was just they were lackluster, and Mount Sion just smothered them. Mount Sion they were very physical, used the ball well, but then the shooting, the wind was tricky now to be fair, but the shooting wasn't great. But yeah, Dan was. He was taken off at half time, but even I can't, his name escaped me now top of my head, that went in for him was at nothing. He wasn't used at all either, like in full forward. Like, I mean, it was hopeless really.
Yeah, a couple of comments coming in here already. Adrian McGrath says 6 Mile Bridge red hot favourites for Clare now. The new management had them absolutely flying. William Coleman, Jesus said, never thought I'd see the day you were wearing a Clare Gansey. Maybe if we were back in the 90s, I certainly wouldn't consider wearing it. But
not a fluke of a jersey.
And then a bit of a piss-taking comment, I'd say, heading in your direction. Is Waldron getting old? He looks depressingly like a generic GA hipster young reporter. Put on the sunglasses at least, FFS.
I just turned 33, on the 25th of August, so I suppose technically I am getting older. But I've looked 33 for the last 10 years.
Yeah, well, you've a few more years left in you. I'm just going to go through the other results again in Waterford there. So De La Salle beating Dungarvan. That was revenge for losing to the same team last year. Rowan Moore, Gavin O'Brien, he hit 15 points. So they're back into the semi-finals after making the final last year. Mikey Kiley scored an early goal for Abbeyside, really well taken. Typical Mikey Kiley type goal. And then late on, he actually had a 21-yard free saved, which Conor Prunty, the full-back, came up and rebounded in. But the free came about from Prunty soloing up the field. He had his 2 catches taken, and he was still hopping the ball all the way into the square and eventually got fouled. So that's Rowan Moore through there. And it's always interesting to see a goalkeeper playing centre-back. Billy Nolan, a very mobile player, obviously on the Waterford panel. And do you think, do Rowan Moore, do Mount Sion, do De La Salle have a hope of upsetting Ballygunner this year, do you think?
So, from what I saw, and then Thomas Douglas there, Tonto, they call him, for De La Salle, scored 1-5 from play as well against Dungarvan. But Dungarvan got 2 lads sent off. And you're not going to win against a good senior team with 13 players. So they'll be really disappointed. But De La Salle, from what I've heard and seen and reading and stuff, they've gotten far better this year. But I'd say Mount Sion and De La Salle would be tough and fiery and everything, and you'd kind of nearly be hoping that one of them would, from an outsider's point of view, that one of them would come through clean and give Ballygunner a type of, some kind of challenge. But from what I saw yesterday, Mount Sion, if they tidied it up, the shooting wise and stuff, that Mount Sion and Ballygunner could be a right good game. And if Ballygunner make the final now and beat Rowan Moore, right, make it into the final, they'll be going for 9 championships in a row, right? Ballygunner have never done it. Erin's Own and Mount Sion have done it. And if it's Mount Sion and Ballygunner in a county final, and Mount Sion will be going all guns blazing to stop Ballygunner from getting 9 in a row, right? Because remember, there was a story years ago or whatever about when it was done before. Erin's Own had done 9 in a row, and Mount Sion were going for 10 in a row. So they had won 9 and were going for 10 in a row, and a load of Erin's Own lads came out of retirement and stopped them from winning the 10th in a row, so that they couldn't beat the record, and then they retired again. So maybe Ken McGrath and Tony Brown might come out of retirement for a county final if they make it. But I would just judging on what I saw there at the weekend, probably Mount Sion are the closest, but Ballygunner were, they were, they scored 127, won by 12 points yesterday, but it could have been more only for 4 Mile Water. Had a very good system, to be fair to them. They had they're lacking enough hurlers really to beat Ballygunner, and but they were set up well. They were hard to break down. If they had more hurlers, it would have been a far closer game, obviously. But Ballygunner, they rarely overhit a pass. They rarely strike it, to feet. It's either one bouncing into the hand or else it's directly into hand. They're really motoring on a different level. They're 10 different scores as well. So.
Yeah, and the Mahoney brothers, Pádraig, Kevin and Mikey, accounted for 116 between them, and Kevin came up with the goal there. I just want to also talk about what Austin Gleeson said on TG Cahir afterwards. He was asked about the Waterford team and the year they had. And obviously, we know now Liam Cahill is gone and Davy Fitz is in. But he said, we have a good enough team, a nice mix of young and old. We just have to perform. It's up to us to perform. We were in condition to do that last year, but we didn't. It's that simple. We just folded, which is an interesting comment. We just folded. The other teams we came up against really brought their A game, and we couldn't compete with them. We won the league, but at the end of the day, it meant absolutely nothing because we did nothing in the championship. We went for the league, and maybe we got a bit more confidence than we needed to have. So championship was extremely disappointing. Everyone feels that. Hopefully there's a hungry bunch there when we're ready to go back again. I don't know, did you chat to anyone down in Waterford about how they feel about going forward to next year, the Davy Fitz thing? And even just a couple of those comments from Aussie were very interesting. We just folded being one, and maybe we got more confidence than we needed to have from that league win.
Probably, yeah, because in the league, like, I had seen them live and stuff, they were miles ahead of other teams in the league. Like, they really were, and you're kind of thinking, geez, if they improve at all, like, they'll be, you know, which kind of is what you expect. Like, you know, the league is there as basically pre-season, and you're supposed to improve. But if anything, it was almost as if they had reached their peak and then couldn't exceed what their performances in the league, and everyone caught up and passed them out. So, yeah, I mean, like, this was the thing. No one kind of really understood what happened, and a lot of people saying maybe they were overtrained and they were just tired and they were flat. And I'm talking to some of the players as well, like they really thought that they kind of threw the game away against Limerick, that first group game. That they thought that they really thought that they were going to win that game, and even after, like, still during the summer, they were talking to people saying, like, you know, like, still even that they thought they should have won that game. So, just judging from the outside, yeah, and I mean, I was asked about it yesterday. You know, what will Davy have to do to improve on last year? And it's as simple as, like, you know, they have to at least make the Munster final. Like, they really do, or get out. Well, you know, get out of Munster obviously, but they really, I think, have to be competing for some kind of a trophy in championship. Like, it's great to win a national league because it's a national trophy that there aren't too many of them in Waterford. Like, and it was a great achievement. But like Austin said there, and like loads of the players, you know, anyone that plays or has played knows it. Championship is where it counts. Like, so, yeah, for Davy to improve, like, yeah, they're going to have to at least, I think, make the Munster final.
Yeah, they're also going to have to bring through maybe a young lad or two, try and hope that the likes of Iarla Daly can stay fit. Obviously, he got injured with that ankle issue against Limerick. Conor Prunty to not pick up more injuries, Tadhg de Burka to stay fit, Jamie Barron. So that'll be a big part of it too. Just the relegation playoffs in Waterford. Passage beat Tallow and Clonee. Is it Clonee or Clonee? Clonee beat. Yeah, they beat Dunhill. Right, we'll talk about the Kilkenny County Championship, and both Shamrocks and Bennett's Bridge, they're top of the two groups, Group A and Group B. I'll just kind of go through the results here. So in Group A, Dixborough beat Lisdowney 419 to 220. Erin's Own put up a good performance against Shamrocks, 22 points to 20, and Mulnavat's off Clare by 120 to 19 points. Most of these games are pretty close. Then in the other group, that Bennett's Bridge are top of, Dixborough beat Greg Ballycallan by 323 to 113, which is fair shooting. James Stevens, they lost to O'Loughlin Gales in the City Derby, 215 to 121. And Glenmore scored 213 against Bennett's Bridge's 315. So that's 4 wins from 4 for Bennett's Bridge. Just at the top of the first group, Shamrocks, then Tullaroan, then Clara, Mulnavat. It's all pretty tight. And the order of merit in Group B is Bennett's Bridge, Dixborough, O'Loughlin Gales, Glenmore. Again, and James Stevens with only 1 win from 4, so they're under a bit of pressure there. What's the mood in your native Kilkenny in terms of the county championship? Can Shamrocks be stopped?
I think they actually probably could this year, yeah. You know, nothing lasts forever, I suppose, but I think they actually might get caught this year. Now, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Bennett's Bridge? It could be Tullaroan, could be O'Loughlin's. You know, it'll be a tough one because, like, it's funny there as well, like, looking at the results, Glenmore are actually doing very well for a team that just came up out of intermediate, and they have a huge game at the weekend against O'Loughlin's, and then the Village are playing the Borough, which could actually sink them and stick them in the bottom 2 of the group. Like, so the Village need to win and they need Glenmore to lose and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think probably it'll be between the Shamrocks, O'Loughlin's, Bennett's Bridge, Tullaroan, and then maybe Dixborough as well, kind of somewhere between them. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if, depending on the draw and depending on what way it goes, like if O'Loughlin's maybe met Ballyhale in the semi-final and beat them. And then, you know, again, last year, I really think, and even from talking to the lads when you go down and get hurls and stuff, from talking to the lads, Tullaroan really feel like they left one behind them last year. Like, they were beaten by a point in the semi-final by O'Loughlin's, and they definitely had enough of the play to get into that county final. So they wouldn't be too far off it. The Sash, maybe they're back.
Yeah, I just find it so interesting the way teams can come up from intermediate and be so competitive in the Kilkenny Senior Championship. Lisdowney, they've only one win from 4 games there, but their scoring difference is only -10. So obviously they've been very competitive. Tullaroan are in second in their group after 4 games. And like you've already mentioned there, Glenmore have 2 wins out of 4 games, -11 scoring difference. So really competitive. Is that any surprise to you as someone who's grown up playing in Kilkenny?
Um, so there was a few years there where it used to be kind of you'd go up and come down, and sort of team would go up and come down. But then, like again, I was there Saturday morning getting hurls, and the lads from Tullaroan were saying like probably the best thing that ever happened to them was that they spent a couple of years in intermediate, because it used to be a case of they'd win 1 game a year and that would be like the relegation, and that it was just too tense and all that. And now that the younger lads got the experience of losing intermediate semi-final, losing intermediate final, then going on the great run that they went on, and they were able to actually develop a team and realise what it takes. Like, so sometimes going down and come back up, there's no harm at all. But I mean, Fenian's there for a long time. I don't know what the hell JJ Delaney's record is. Something like he won something like 9 or 10 relegation finals. Like, and it's like, but then they were close to actually being in a couple of senior finals. So it kind of is and it isn't. It depends on the club that goes down and comes back up. Like Bennettsbridge were built to stay up senior. Like, they won the junior and then won straight away, won intermediate. But they had basically, their team had been dismantled. They were down in junior for a long time, developed underage, and then they just pushed right through and have been senior since. Like when I was playing in Kilkenny, we were beaten in the intermediate final by Clare, and Clare went on and won 2 seniors. And then the following year, we were beaten by Castlecomer by a point in the quarter final, and then they've been senior since. Whereas then the lads in Freshford, they went up intermediate, or they went up senior and came straight back down. So, and Dainsport did well. They stayed up for a long time. Now we're back intermediate. So it kind of ebbs and flows. It's funny when it just depends on the club, depends how stable you are, how strong you are, and what you've done underage. Because Ballycannon look to be kind of struggling now again as well.
Yeah, Joe Butler gives a bit of background on Shamrocks at the moment. I knew they were down a couple of players, but he said they played without the Reid brothers at the start. They were also missing Patrick Mullen, Colin Fennelly, Darren Mullen went off injured after 10 minutes. Joey Cuddihy was also missing from Shamrocks, and of course Joey Holden has gone travelling, I think.
Joey Holden and Colin Fennelly were over playing with the Fianna in San Francisco. They won the American National Championship. The world champions.
No better men to do it. Just a reminder, we've got a coaching clinic coming up. It's going to be on in UCD. I'm sure you've seen it on my Twitter at Shane Saint. If you want to scan the QR code or click the link in, it's going to be a great. Anyone who's an aspiring coach out there or has a big interest in camogie or hurling, Martin Fogarty, Kieran Kerry and Matty Kenny, they're all going to be running sessions there. So that's going to be great stuff. And we're going to have players that are going to be running the sort of drills and exercises with them. So that's definitely something to consider if you're available for that night, which is going to be in the 16th of September, Friday evening. It's in UCD, so there's loads of parking there and the whole lot. We're joined now by Fintan O'Toole of the 42. Fintan, how are things with you?
All good, Shane. All good. I have to bring you up in your tweet already. I think I said welcome to our game on this Tuesday afternoon. I mean, I know you've been on holidays for the last couple of weeks, but we'll just like that straight away anyway,
Yeah, I've let myself down. Look, I'll be honest. I had a heavy few days out in Croatia, Slovenia, and Italy, and I'm a little bit worse for wear. Like, what would you expect? I was. Yeah, you dragged it out of me.
This is like pre-season. You're working your way back into kind of championship fitness now over the next couple of weeks,
Yeah, but I feel I've been thrown in at the deep end. I've been asked to perform for 60 minutes when I probably only have 10 in me. We're going to move on now. We've been talking about the Kilkenny Championship, but we're going to talk about Dublin now. And I just ask you, obviously, Naoise's been a cooler teammate of mine for a long, long time, and you were playing with the second team over the weekend. But I'm just going to talk about the 4 games that did go on in the Senior A Championship. So Coola 223, St. Jude's 213. St. Bridget's beat Crave Kieran 124 to 211. Again, Crave struggling to put big scores on the board. They generally average 13 or 14 scores in a game. Ballyboden beat a very depleted Nafina 20 points to 13. And Nafina probably should have won that final last year, but their injuries are killing them. And Kilmacud Crokes, they beat Lucan Sarsfields at the weekend, 124 to 18 points. Ronan Hayes on target there. What stood out from you from the weekend's action, Naoise?
Probably the Nafina and Ballyboden. I was watching it there, and it was 11 points to 1 at half time. Nafina played far better in the second half now and dragged it back, but they were so sloppy in the first half. I know they're missing a lot of players, but that was a game that they probably, when you look back on it, like they probably left it behind them a bit. Donald Burke missed a penalty in the first half and 2 frees, and they ended up losing by 7 points, I think it was. And it was obvious in the first half as well. It's the amount of ball they were hitting wide and just waste. And AJ Murphy was very good, probably Nafina's best forward apart from Donald Burke in the second half then. But Ballyboden were set up very well. They're very physical, hard to break down. But with a full squad, you'd be expecting Nafina to be far better. But I think they really left that game behind them there on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Fintan, how much of it you saw over the weekend, but Kilmacud Crokes obviously came from well behind to win that county final last year, and putting up 124 against league champions Lucan suggests that they're ready to go again.
Yeah, you think on the basis of last year, I suppose, and just looking at kind of, I suppose, the amount of players that they have kind of playing at various levels for Dublin teams, that kind of will be kind of one of the favourites. I think they have an addition this year, Cormac Murphy, who would have played senior for Cork a couple of years ago. As far as I know, I think he's joined them. I'm not sure if he's
Chris O'Leary, wasn't
he? Starting regular or not. Yeah.
Chris O'Leary's went to Lucan, actually.
Yeah. So, and I suppose just on the outside as well, you think, looking back at last year's Leinster club, is there a bit of kind of motivation there with the way it kind of ended for them against Clock Ballycolla to kind of get back and kind of put back to back? But just like the Nafina one kind of stands out to me as well, just looking at that from the outside, because that is definitely, when you think back to last year's final, that was in the palm of their hand, and all the kind of Dublin underage teams that last couple of years, a lot of very big kind of rising stars coming from the club. But I suppose you think it's going to come naturally, that you're going to kind of make that breakthrough at senior level, but you just, I don't know, is there kind of scar tissue from that kind of a game? When you lose a county final like that, is it hard to kind of get it going again the following year?
Yeah, and then I suppose who else is going to push Kilmacud Crokes this year? Like Nafina, with so many players injured, it feels like it's going to be very difficult for them. Ballyboden are always thereabouts. I feel like St. Bridget's, the last day out, they kind of collapsed from a good position against Crokes. But they have a lot of good players there, a lot of good county panellists and what have you, Naoise. And then obviously Coola, Darragh O'Connell and Liam Murphy got the goals against St. Jude's the other day, and Conor Callahan came back as well. So it feels like it's pretty wide open.
Oh yeah, big time. But I was even kind of thinking about it at the start of the year too. Like there was probably about 5 teams if you included Lucan as well. After winning the league, be between Crokes, Nafina, Ballyboden, Lucan, and Coola, I'd say really. So it is open, and it's funny. Like when you look at the other county club senior championship matches, and then you look at the Dublin ones, like people, who are looking for silky skills and flashy scores, like you're not really going to find them in the Dublin Championship. Like like Ballyboden and the Nafina game was a hard, tough, physical game, and even Jude's and Coolas, like it's all swarm. There's 2 or 3 people you have to beat before you can get a pass off and all that. So it's a completely different type of game. Even in the summer, like it just is played. That's just the way it's played here. So it is hard, and even you could see like Timmy Hammersley even as well. He gets closed down very quickly. It's hard to find space in a forward line the way the teams in Dublin are set up. So it is open. It's definitely open this year. And again, if Nafina gets a full strength team back with everybody fit, they'll definitely be back in the shake-up again. But without they're missing too many players really. I would think. But yeah, it's an open championship. Definitely an open championship, because there's so many teams. Like but Ballyboden would never fear, this whole kind of thing of like Ballyboden would never fear Kilmacud Crokes, like and would actually think that they could nearly bully them every time they play them. So that's the thing. But then Cool and Ballyboden are always massive matches as well. To be skin and hair and avocados flying, so they're always good games as well. Like so, it's very open this year.
Yeah, would you consider Dublin one of the more physical championships? I mean, Naoise's talked about it there. I've played it. It's very, very physical. Would you consider, like Cork is often accused, Fintan, of not being a physical championship. Is this something that you would observe when you're watching it?
Yeah, I would kind of agree. Look, I probably obviously not kind of seeing as much games kind of eyewitness as you would, and probably not as kind of close to the scene, but definitely it would seem there's 4 or 5 teams kind of ahead of the rest, that there is a kind of a big kind of a gap. You probably would have seen that maybe over kind of the last decade, but it does seem that kind of way. But there is definitely that element to it. I don't know, there's part of it feed into it, the fact that you're seeing a lot of the games in Parnell Park, and it just has that feeling when you're watching on TV or if you're in the stand, it has that kind of a tight feel to it, and games can kind of be kind of claustrophobic. And it is interesting, I suppose, guess the perceptions that kind of stand the counties, as you say. It has been kind of a recurring kind of theme in Cork. The refereeing is probably one thing that's kind of commented upon a lot, that doesn't kind of lend itself to it, the kind of maybe referees a bit kind of whistle happy and that kind of thing. And then the teams are kind of suffering as going out into the kind of provincial club championship in comparison to Dublin. I was only just seeing as well, it was Micheál Donoghue, I think, was at the games, we'll see on Saturday. So that was his first kind of weekend to kind of get a look at it. I mean, like, really interesting appointment last week. So we were talking about Verney, kind of probably caught a lot of people by surprise, unless either of the two of you maybe got wind of it. Like, but we were saying that, I think, was it the first in a long time a county managerial appointment that it hadn't even been linked. His name hadn't even been thrown in there up until it was actually announced this time last week.
Yeah, I had heard it. Sorry, I'd heard it ages ago when it first came about that Dublin were looking for a new manager, that he had put his name in, was interested, but then I hadn't heard it since. So I just presumed, all right, he must be interested now. And then next thing it was announced, because I heard basically a couple of other names that were like, oh yeah, it'll be him, whatever. Not Micheál Donoghue. Next thing then it was announced, but I think it was the best, as far as I'm concerned, really. Like, it was the best probably that they could have gotten.
Yeah, definitely seems like a good appointment. Like, his last game ever as Galway senior hurling manager was defeat to Matty Kenny's Dublin in 2019 in Leinster, that dramatic day. So it's interesting that he's now going to take over. And like Fintan, there's only so many players or managers at the top level who've already got that proven experience. There's managers who do it at under 20 level, that maybe do it with club teams, but it is a different level at the senior intercounty level. So in some ways, Dublin have kind of gone for a safe pair of hands. But like, there's managers out there who considered a safe pair of hands, but they've been on the road a long time and maybe they're not playing modern stuff anymore. But maybe Micheál Donoghue is not particularly old. The only thing is, there was an awful lot of long ball with his Galway team in the last couple of years, and I'm not sure if that would suit Dublin. So he's going to have to adjust.
He is, but I go in a way, it's even hurling even evolved a little bit from the 2018-19 era that he was in. Like, the style of play that would have been there when they won the All-Ireland in 2017. Obviously, they were the first side to lose to Limerick in an All-Ireland final in 2018. But even the Limerick style, I think, over the last couple of years has even become more refined in terms of kind of retention, possession, and playing through the lines, and they've become even more proficient on that. So, like you said, yeah, you'd probably have to evolve and adapt. It seems like he's very hungry to kind of get back involved. The fact that he's done it, like all of these things these days, obviously you see the Mayo football situation. It's almost more interesting in who's he got with him, And I mean, from the outside, it seems like he's two guys that, in Francis Ford and O'Larkin, the one he's very familiar with and he's worked alongside, and they also kind of kept themselves, kind of finger on the pulse with kind of work with Laois and Westmeath and that. And then obviously Shane O'Brien is kind of seems very well regarded, probably very good insight into the Dublin hurling scene, while at the same time, between the Wexford club work and the Westmeath manager job, he's probably gained a bit of experience further afield. So I think it's a very, very kind of strong proposition that they've kind of put together in kind of assembling kind of at this stage. And the point you make about being on the road, yeah, I think that's kind of relevant, because why it can happen sometimes at the end of the day, it's only 6 years since he first took over the Galway reins, so that's a very short period of time. It's over a decade since he won the All-Ireland club with Clare Bridge. So you imagine he still is quite hungry to kind of make his mark, and it does add a lot of spices, along with Derek Ling getting a point in Kilkenny in terms of the Leinster Championship, the outlook for next year.
Yeah, and Shane O'Brien was over the Dublin development squad last year, so he'll definitely know. Like, if Micheál Donoghue wants to know what are the players potentially coming, there's a fair chance that Shane O'Brien has had his eyes clapped on him. Flash asks, what would be success for Dublin under O'Donoghue or Micheál Donoghue in 2023? I'd say getting out of Leinster. I think that they have to be targeting that and finding 3 or 4 players, Naoise.
Yeah, get back to
Leinster. Are they there? Naoise, like, because I'm not playing this year. You're still playing, and you're playing with the second team as well, and the first team between the 2 leagues and championships. Do you see players out there that maybe aren't being picked up?
Yeah, I'd say Liam Murphy could be in with a shout this year from Coola. He's after physically developing, and again, like, he's still only 21, 22, so there's definitely talent there. Liam would be someone that pops off the top of my head. The under 20s, his name escapes me now. Kilmacud Crokes, playing centre back, white helmet. Crow, sorry. There again.
Davy Crow, definitely.
Yeah, Davy Crow. Yeah. There's 2. Definitely should be pushing in there, and maybe even trying to actually recall a couple of lads. The like of I know Colin is a qualified doctor now and all, but maybe isn't interested anymore. But just for example, off the top of my head, trying to recall some people that might have just kind of skated away from the panel for one reason or another. There's just I don't know. It just seemed a bit kind of laissez-faire, we'll say, the last couple of years. Now they were very unlucky there the year that they got to the Leinster final and all that COVID stuff happened and it just fizzled out then, and you would hope to God Owen O'Donnell is sticking around with the hurlers as well. So yeah, there are players there and the setup is there, and they were in under 20 All-Ireland final a year and a half, 2 years ago. So there's obviously talent there. So you just need to wait on them to kind of mature, but bring them on. And again, Shane O'Brien, I've been around him a good bit at coaching clinics and things like. He's really good. And then the two lads that he brought with him as well. Anyone I talked to from Galway loved them lads as well. So look, I think they really should be progressing. If they're not, there's something really wrong, because that management team is pretty much as good as you're going to get. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant stuff, Naoise. Really appreciate you joining us. We'll chat to you again soon.
Sound job. See
you, Naoise.
Oh, I cut him off mid-flow there. But Fintan, I wanted to go on and talk about the Cork Championship. Obviously, a championship you know very well. But there's a couple of very interesting storylines over the weekend. Players that maybe 12 or 15 years ago were making national headlines, but they're doing it for their clubs at a lower level over the weekend.
Yeah, so I suppose it was something myself and Bernie were discussing last week. At the moment, there's so much group games at the moment, it's kind of hard to maybe kind of pick out and kind of maybe take an interest from the outside. But Cork, I suppose, was a big weekend because it was the last round of group games at all the different levels. And so there was a lot at stake. The fact that they put 12 teams in each grade, huge amount of competitiveness with relegation and qualification issues at play. But just a couple that jumped out. So we'll get to the kind of the top level senior stuff in a while. But the kind of stuff that jumped out was the fact that, I suppose, in the senior A grade, Cloyne at half-time, all the games started at the same time. But at half-time of the games on Saturday night, they were in the relegation playoff. But by full-time, because they'd won by 13 points, they got into the quarterfinals. Donald Cusack is coaching them. He is one of the contenders at the moment, from what I understand, for the Cork under 20 manager job. So I suppose that's interesting. And he would have taken the club minor team a couple of years back, and they would have won a county title and brought through some of those. But one of the older names, I suppose, is Paddy O'Sullivan, who better known as a forward, but they played him centre back on Saturday night, and by all accounts was a huge factor in terms of kind of his distribution and kind of a launch pad in terms of kind of directing stuff. And just really interesting, I guess, how much the fortunes can swing. I think they had to win by a certain amount, and another game had to go their way. But once they kind of kept basically winning, they were able to swing the scoring difference. So I think they're up by 5 at half time. But it's just an interesting one. I've seen that a couple of games over the weekend. People are checking their phones constantly for how other games are going because it impacts on them. And you see information filtering down to the sidelines, and it's a thing for management teams. Then, you can't let players in the dark. As in, 6-point win isn't good enough. We got to keep going, or we need a couple of goals or something like that. But it seemed to work out for Cloyne. And then the other one yesterday was in the Premier Senior Championship. The group, I suppose, that was kind of most interesting was that the reigning champions Midleton got knocked out, and we might talk about that in a minute. But Newtown Chandram were the beneficiaries. They got through. They beat Douglas, and again. They needed to win, but they also needed Midleton to drop points because the scoring difference just wasn't going to work out in their favour. They would have had to win, I think, by about 15 to 20 points. As it was, they won by 6. Big win for them, considering Douglas have a lot of kind of big county names, recognisable figures. Had won their 2 games so far, but this was the interesting name. We named the team sheet was Cathal Loughlin, who has been in Sydney, I think, for the last 5 or 6 years. Probably moved over kind of not long after he kind of left the Cork senior scene, but is back this year. His brother Shane is actually the Newtown manager, so maybe that was a factor in maybe trying to get him involved. But they played in midfield yesterday. He got 3 points in play. They still have Jamie Collin, who was a Cork senior, Tim O'Mahony, a current Cork senior, Cormac O'Brien, who captained the Cork under 20s to the All-Ireland win last year. So got a nice little mix there, and I suppose a team that they're still the last club from Cork to win the Munster Senior Championships in 2009, and in that decade, different battles with the likes of Thurles Sarsfields and Ballygunner, they were kind of very prominent force, so just interesting, I guess, that our lads coming back and kind of giving the club a dig out, but impacting in a fairly meaningful way as well in terms of they've obviously got through the quarterfinal now.
Isn't that club for you? You have to kind of maximise, no matter what age lads are, just try and get that best mix out there. But you mentioned Midleton, the county champions, being gone, losing 3-15 to 2-19 against Kanturk. Brian O'Sullivan, he had a free in injury time to secure their status in the top flight. And that was just after Alan Walsh's goal had levelled it up for them. Like, that's a bit of a shocker for Midleton, really, isn't it?
It is. I mean, these things never run as smooth as that, but like to explain the form guide, like, so Kanturk had lost their 2 games to date. Last time out, Midleton beat Newtown Chandler by 10 points. The previous round, Newtown had beaten Kanturk by, I think it was 5 points. I know it's not exactly black and white that Midleton are then 15 points better than Kanturk, but they would have been strong favourites to win this. Seemed to have a very slow start, but then got into it in the second half, got 3 goals. So you then think they've weathered the storm. Like, I was at another game yesterday, and different people in the terrace that I was standing at, people are kind of talking about the crowds, and it's like, the consensus seemed to be, Midleton are gone ahead, they'll close it out now and they'll win it. And obviously the fact that they won it last year, they have a huge amount of talent, guys playing at various grades. Their coach this year, it's quite an interesting one, James O'Connor, who obviously had a lot of success with Ballyhale, amongst other kind of clubs that he's been involved in the last couple of years. But then, if you have to hand it to Kanturk, it was a fair old achievement. I think it's Frank Flannery who would have been without at the Bala. Before, again, he's obviously had a lot of different kind of roles. He's over Kanturk, but that actually win basically got them out of the relegation playoff setup and basically knocked Midleton out. So that's kind of a major contender. Champions last year, finalists in 2018. And again, it just shows in the space of 5 minutes the way the permutations worked out. Like 4 points up, set for a quarter final. Next thing, 5 minutes later, out of the championship. So yeah, kind of big surprise really. I don't think too many would have forecast that result yesterday.
Yeah, I'm just going to give the quarter-final lineups. And Aaron's own are already through to the semi-finals. The relegation playoff will be in the Piercing against Charleville. But the teams through to the quarter-finals will be Douglas against St. Finbarrs, Glen Rovers against Newtown Chandram, and Blackrock against Imekilly. But to go through the results then, Aaron's own beat Bishopstown by a point. Glen Rovers won 26 points to 3-7 against the Piercing. 12 points there for Patrick Horgan. Blackrock's off Charleville by a couple. Sarsfields, they lost by 4-19 to 19 points against St. Finbarrs. Ethan Toomey, Jack Cahalane, Brian Hayes and Owen Finn, they all scored goals. And Sars are out. A busy weekend for Peter Quealy, who was over both Rowan Moore and coach in Sarsfields.
Yeah, he was involved on Saturday when they won, and then he was on the line yesterday. So yeah, that was the game that I was at. Just went up to have a look at it. Huge crowd in for it. The final score, 12 points, is probably a bit misleading in the sense that it was a very, very tight game for about 3/4 of it, but really, really entertaining. There's a lot of talk about St. Finbarrs because I suppose the level of young player that they're bringing through, and particularly, I guess, in the talk about what code some of these guys are going to go towards, So you've Ben O'Connor, who was a Cork All-Ireland minor hurling winning captain last year. He's a very, very good hurler, obviously, really, really well regarded and kind of flagged for kind of to push on different grades, but also an excellent rugby player, Schools Cup player last year. He missed a bit of the under-20 hurling championship this year for Cork because he was with an Irish schools rugby team in France. But yesterday he was really, really prominent. You'd Ethan Toomey in midfield, Ben Cunningham in the attack. His dad, Ger, of course, the former Cork coach and Dublin manager. He's now managing St. Finbarrs. Jack Cahalane as well. So you've a lot of these guys blended in. You also have the other 2 Cahalanes, Damien Connor and then Brian Hayes, who again, Cork senior footballer this year, but a lot of kind of talk about would he be kind of tempted to go in with the hurlers, having played under Pat Ryan before. So it still seems a bit uncertain there. But they got 2 early goals. Then St. Finbarr or Sarsfield's got it back to a 2-point game, sorry. And then they struck for a 3rd goal. So it ended up being like 3 points in at a half time. Very, very kind of evenly balanced in the 3rd quarter. But then St. Finbarrs had made a couple of positional changes. Conor Cahalane going to midfield had a huge impact. And they kind of got a handle. This was the interesting tactical thing was Jack O'Connor was playing centre forward on Damien Cahalane, but St. Finbarrs were basically trying to get Damien Cahalane free the whole time. And as sometimes happens with these situations, O'Connor was kind of in that pocket between the midfielder who was kind of maybe meant to come back and kind of pick him up and kind of in front of the sitting centre back. And he popped over about 3 or 4 points in the first half. But then they completely did get a handle on it and they kind of got that communication right. They never looked like conceding a goal. And then once they got the 4th goal themselves, they were through. So again, another big side gone out, and the fact that themselves in Midleton, who underage have had a lot of players involved in Cork teams and have been doing well in club championships in Cork, that they're both out in the same weekend is a big thing. And I thought it was a great quote actually this morning. The fact that Aaron's owner through to the semi-finals. I thought their manager said, like, not only would no one in the county have expected us to be the first team to go through, I don't think we would have expected it either, But like, they're an amazing club, an amazing side in terms of the guys who still have going for them. I mean, Kieran Hero Murphy, people might remember him from playing Cork Senior. Like, he's 39, playing wing forward. I think, as the manager said, when they needed yesterday, he was the guy that won 3 or 4 vital balls. Like Cian O'Connor, I think he's 37, 38, maybe in the full back line. Shea Bowen, the goalkeeper, is about that age as well. They just have that mix then to someone like Robbie O'Flynn. Obviously, they're kind of marquee senior name. He gets 5 points from play. And they just are a side that are getting the absolute most out of themselves. It's actually Timmy Hammersley's brother, Kieran, is actually coaching them this year from Clonelty. And then last year they would have been coached by Donald O'Rourke, who's gone in now with the Cork Senior Hurlers from Waterford. Would have had a lot of success in Waterford and Galway, Camogie in the last couple of years. So it is very interesting the way it panned out. I don't think, no one would really probably put them as the kind of favourites to get the one semi-final spot on offer. And it kind of sets up a few interesting quarters. But St. Finbarr is probably an interesting side to watch out for now, having won the county in 29 years for a club of their stature, but have a good bit of momentum in them now behind them going into a quarter-final.
And so how much of the St. Finbarr's team that got to the All-Ireland Club semi-final last year are also playing hurling? And how far do you think this St. Finbarr's team can go? Because, like, you see all the Cahillans in there and you think straight away that's a great spine to a team. Yeah,
well, I suppose the other thing you mentioned them, they don't play football with St. Finbarr's, they play football with Castlehaven, but that is an obvious complication because they're going pretty strong as well. You have some like Brian Hayes, Jamie Burns, football, but then you have a few that are exclusively hurling. As far as I know, Owen Finn, the centre forward, we got 1-4 from play is guys like Owen Keane, cornerback. Off the top of my head, maybe kind of about 5 or 6, but there are probably half of the team have kind of dual commitments. And the young guys I mentioned, like Ben O'Connor, Ethan Toomey, they've all actually gone into the senior football setup this year. So there will be a lot of guys kind of going on both fronts, and they're footballers of a last group game this weekend, but they're already through to the knockout stages. They'll be one of the favourites to retain that again. So yeah, I guess it's just kind of cooperation. Like, I suppose the senior football manager, Paul O'Keefe, it's interesting, he's the doctor for the club hurling team. So obviously he's keeping a close eye on that setup, and they're kind of able to kind of juggle the scene. Look, you know it well, like from the Lochmore Castleknock situation, the dual thing is like, I think it is proving quite intense on clubs, but at the same time, when a side does it and manages to successfully juggle them both and goes all the way, there is this tendency, can't everyone do it? Like, but I think ultimately it's the exception rather than the norm of teams being managing able to do it, But definitely they have a lot of momentum behind them in both codes, and they have a lot of talent at the moment.
Yeah, hurling 1, 2, 3, 4 says Barr is really fulfilling their potential. Hayes and Jack Cahillan up front, Ethan Toomey and Conor Cahillan very good in midfield. Toomey's goal was class. They will have a lot involved with Cork. And then also the pairings of this. Let me just see. They're going to try and avoid repeat pairings where possible in the semi-final, I suppose, is the bottom line on that. The Clare hurling championship over the weekend, Cracklow beat Ballier by 221 to 14 points, but not really a big deal because Ballier are already through. Cracklow had a couple of goals from Rian Considine and Michael Hawes, so they were well ahead at half time. Red card for Brandon O'Donnell kind of put Ballier on the back foot from the 38th minute on. But it is their first championship defeat since September 2020. So there is some significance to that. 6 Mile Bridge had a handy win over Whitegate, 326 to 20 points. They're top of the group. Also had 17 wides as well. So Whitegate are heading for relegation. Ina Kilnamona beat Wolf Tones 21 points to 212. Aidan McCarthy, again, impressive. Again, I'm sure Brian Lohan is regretting the fact that he just wasn't available due to injury this year. Crusheen beat Smith O'Brien's 220 to 13. Ayr Oaks off Clooney Quinn 22 points to 15. Clooney Quinn are group winners anyway, despite this defeat. Ayr Oak are also through. Kilmaley beat Scariff and by 4 points, and O'Callaghan Mills, they beat Broadford 311 to 18 points. And Broadford's loss to that late goal there sees them now preparing for a winner-takes-all showdown with Clare Castle in 2 weeks' time to avoid relegation battle there. So Clare is very much hotting up, Fintan.
It is, yeah, and I suppose just a couple of kind of notable sides I think are out of the race in terms of Kilmaley would won the Clare Cup, which is, I think, it's kind of their league competition, but it does have a good bit of regard, I think, and they kind of take it pretty seriously. And you obviously have guys like Conor Cleary involved there, and different teams, but obviously that they're out at the group stage. Clonlara as well been out. I suppose the one kind of outcome of the Cracklow Ballier game that is interesting in terms of Ballier now, I think we'll have to face a group winner in the quarter-final draw, so you could get drawn against 6 Mile Bridge or Ina Kilnamona, so that's going to be a considerably harder one. And you just wonder from the Cracklow point of view, I think it was a couple of years ago, they lost to Ballier after a replay. Might just be a small little kind of psychological kind of boost to kind of get a group stage win like that, and that can kind of fire you on. And again, I suppose, look, we're talking about dual clubs. I mean, they're obviously a side that are probably know all about it in terms of trying to juggle serve two masters and try and keep the thing going on both fronts. But yeah, definitely just kind of looking into the outside. This is probably a classic example of what I was talking about. You start to get, I know with you, but you start to get a bit more interested in it now because it's starting coming to quarter-final stage, and you see there's stuff at jeopardy, or there's a bit of jeopardy enters the equation, and we're kind of going to get an idea of the shape-up going forward for the last 8.
Yeah, and the Laois Hurling Championship, that's definitely also hotting up. A huge win for Castletown. They're through to their first Laois semi-final since 2009. They beat Rose and Alice by 215 to 115. And Camrus will also be in the semi-finals. They had a fairly hefty win over Burrs Kilcotton, 220 to 12 points. Burrs Kilcotton weren't too far away from, in the county final last year, so that'll be hugely disappointing for them.
Yeah, like that's the form of that is interesting, isn't it? Because like Clough, Ballacalla obviously go on to the Leinster Club final, and if you're Burrs Kilcotton, you think you're imagining they're probably looking at it going, and the regrets are even heaping on more when you see what they do against Rapparees and then Kilmcud that they beat on Moore Park, and they're having these great occasions and great exposure with live TV, and then you kind of come to this, and yeah, look on the form book. I mean, the fact that it was 14 points at the end, it sounds pretty decisive. Castletown, an interesting one. I think you said Evan Cuddy got the decisive goal later on. Like if that family wasn't ever kind of synonymous with them. Like I think they didn't manage to get a Leinster club, but they definitely played a couple. Verney probably better tell us, but I think it was Burr beat them in a couple of them. But they were kind of one of those sides really, really challenging hard to try and get the provincial breakthrough kind of around the late 90s, early 2000s. But it just didn't happen for them.
Yeah, they definitely got to a final at some stage, yeah.
Getting to your first semi in 13 years, you imagine that's a major breakthrough for them.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to, I'll just touch on football now, and then we'll come back and round up some other results later on. But actually, AFL, because Colin O'Riordan, he's retired from the AFL due to a chronic hip injury, which is, that's awful stuff for the man after he's only managed to play 34 games since making the move in 2015. And 26 years of age, that's awfully disappointing for him. And I mean, in a way, like the highlight of his career will actually be coming back with Tipperary and winning that Munster title. But obviously, his dreams had kind of changed, so it's worked out, and it's tough news for him.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, he's only 26 years of age or something like that. There was kind of some murmurings about this over the last while that his injury wasn't kind of responding. Just stuff we would have been hearing, and Sydney Swans have been kind of issuing kind of medical bulletins about him and all that, but it's a huge achievement to play 34 games. I think people probably don't quite understand it as you guys actually play that level. I mean, they're like, obviously what Zach Toohey is doing is absolutely off the charts, and Mac O'Connor getting to over 100 games, or obviously Toohey's over 200, challenging Jim Science's record. But if you look at the proportion of Irish players that go out there, the few that manage to get into double figures in AFL appearances is very difficult because of adjusting to a new game and injuries and all that. And obviously O'Riordan getting to 34, and he seemed to be really well regarded by the club in terms of kind of his role around the community and his kind of leadership and all that. From what I understand, it's returned from AFL. The door is not completely closed in terms of kind of sporting hopes for the future. What that will entail, whether there's a possibility of playing with Tipperary again, I'm not too sure. I think for the time being, his plan seems to be to just stay out in Sydney. And I guess like something like that is just such a kind of a seismic event in your life. You need to kind of step back and take a bit of stock for a while. I mean, it's just, you say it there when you actually realize that he's been out there 7 years, October 2015, that he has had such a long stint out there. And obviously off the pitch, he's probably really, really settled out there at this stage, So, yeah, very, very tough news from a guy who's achieved so much, obviously, in the game in terms of what we know here, but also I think shouldn't be forgotten, getting to that level over there is really impressive as well.
Yeah, and apparently Conor McKenna, it's understood that he's informed players and management of Tyrone that he's heading back to down under to play AFL. But one man, it's interesting news that St Kilda, they won't be offering Dara Joyce a new contract. He's the brother of Kieran Joyce, who obviously played in All-Ireland finals and won them with Kilkenny a couple of years ago, 2014, or maybe he was there in 2015 as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I wonder, would Derek Ling be kind of keeping an eye out to see, could we get Dara Joyce here? He was a minor All-Ireland winning captain, was at 2014. I'm not entirely sure the year off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, that was the year. It was like the greatest month for the family in terms of he captained them to win the All-Ireland minor. And then Kieran came in for the replay and got man of the match in the All-Ireland final win. It is an interesting one. Like, he's a long time out of the game is the thing, though. Like, look, he obviously has all the physical attributes and he obviously was hugely talented in terms of he was playing Leinster hurling for Good Counsel New Ross, and then that's how he kind of got spotted, or started playing football and got spotted there in the AFL sense. I think there are some suggestions that he, the window or the door may not be completely closed on another club looking to get him in Australia. But if he came back, I mean, like kind of from memory, he was a very, very physically imposing player at underage level for Kilkenny hurling. You imagine that he'd be a big addition if he did come back into the frame. But I don't know. What do you think? I mean, like it's one thing, I suppose, making the adjustment back from Aussie rules to Gaelic football. It would be quite interesting to see. So Markeen is probably the only recent example, and didn't feature very regularly for Cork this year. But it feels like the sort of thing would take maybe a little bit of time with it to kind of get back up to speed.
Yeah, I think it'd be a very, very difficult one, because there's no game that punishes your touch kind of going away from you than hurling. I mean, it does in Gaelic football, and so, it does in every sport, like, because your first touch is so crucial. But I think it would take him quite some time. We've seen players try to do it before, and just it's not always that easy. Maybe if he was given a year or two, because he's such an athlete, maybe he'd be able to overcome that and compensate in other ways. But definitely that would be a huge one. Just a couple of comments from Darragh O'Flynn, just referring back to the Waterford Hurling Championship. Ballygunner are real contenders for winning the Waterford Intermediate Championship also. Ballysaggart will be without Kieran Bennett, as he's supposed to be heading to Australia this week. Darragh O'Flynn also adds, Stephen Bennett also had his right leg heavily strapped, but still managed to score 2-6, 1-2 from play, while Shane scored 5 from play in their Western semi-final victory over Cappoquin. Sean O'Sullivan is saying Isaacie was able to do it, but he was more going in the other direction.
Yeah, and I suppose he did come back and play, but I guess it's just the gap of time is the thing that would stand out for me. I mean, it been 8 years since he captained them to that win. It would be a very interesting one if it did happen. He obviously was part of a side that, as you said, had All-Ireland glory. And the interesting one is, I think it came up before the All-Ireland final this year, people are looking at it, that Limerick team that actually lost that minor final in 2014, was it the greatest? The thing about the Dublin minor football team of 2011, was the Limerick minor hurling team of 2014 the equivalent, the greatest minor team never to actually win an All-Ireland title? Because I think of the starting forward line that day for Limerick, 5 have become All-Stars, which is some going, to be honest. You're shaking your head there. You don't want to hear any more kind of about these stories of Limerick dominance, but it is interesting that I suppose that was his last act notable act on the hurling field.
Okay, so we'll talk a bit more football now. And Cairns O'Reilly beat Spa as it's pronounced, over the weekend in the Kerry Club Senior Football Championship semi-final. So the reason that it's really interesting to talk about this, it's the number 2 competition. The real county championship is to come. But Cairns O'Reilly, they're through to the final. Temple beat Dingle, they're also through to the final. And I was thinking, imagine if Temple had Pat Spillane Jr. and Teddy Doyle still playing. They both obviously transferred away, but for such a tiny club and to get to that Kerry Club final is excellent. But let's say East Kerry go and win the county title again, it'll be the winner of this final who'll get through to the Munster competition. So this is very significant, Fintan.
It is, yeah. This is the big implication here, and the strength of East Kerry means that they will be definitely, you imagine, one of the favourites. Obviously, they've won it twice, and then they were beaten last year, so it's not like they're unstoppable or anything like that. But they have guys like Legion are into the frame with them this year, for example. So they could call on James O'Donoghue to slot into that forward line, for example, alongside David Clifford. So it wouldn't exactly be a bad level of talent to be calling upon for that, But then, yeah, the upshot is the Cairns O'Reillys or Temple could get through. I suppose for both of them, I mean, Temple, it's sort of the rags to riches story. It's a special group who've come along in a very, very small parish. They were like Junior B, I think it was 9 or 10 years ago. They won a Junior All-Ireland around 15, 16, won the Intermediate in 19, and now they're up senior and acquitting themselves really, really well in beating Dingle on Saturday night. I suppose the thing was that Dingle had a man sent off. I think it was Dylan Gainey very early in the game. So essentially, they were able to kind of, I suppose, from what I heard, kind of put 2 players kind of detailed to mark Paul Gainey and kind of get their defensive matchups and general setup and system kind of right there. But look, they have 4 guys who won All-Ireland senior medals in September, different guys around them as well, club players. So it's a huge achievement for them. The interesting thing is that this game, we don't know when it's going to be played, Shane. It's basically going to be played after the county championship now. So it depends how both of them actually do in that level of it, But then Cairns O'Reillys as well, like they lost last year's county senior final. They now, I suppose it'd be a big thing for them to kind of win this club and potentially represent Kerry and Munster if, I suppose we'll have to wait and see if there isn't a club champion winner of that. They actually played each other, I think it was last Sunday week in the group stages, and they drew. So that would kind of indicate that it would be kind of fairly closely matched. But it is an interesting implication kind of down the line in terms of the way the Munster scene might fold out.
Because imagine if it's a situation where both of them get knocked out early enough in the club championship, and then they have to wait several weeks to play a final. Now, maybe they just decide if they were both out, we'll play the final sort of a few weeks before Munster. But you'd have two teams that would potentially not be playing high-level stuff for a few weeks, and then they're thrown into a Munster football championship, and God knows what way a team would be then. There's a score well worth showing from the weekend. This is from former Footballer of the Year, James O'Donoghue, who played for Legion. I think this is pretty tasty stuff. This is at intermediate level.
Yeah, this is in his home ground on yesterday against Kilkenny. They're near neighbours.
He's only about, I'd say, no more than 10 or 12 yards out or from the end line when he hits it.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Not bad at all, is it?
I love that fella's reaction. Oh, Jesus Christ, when he actually realises he's gone for it and it's actually gone over,
Yeah, it was brilliant stuff. And David Clifford banging, shooting the lights out for Fossa again, scored 1-6 as they reached the county semi-final. They won by 115 to 111. There's another great story from the weekend, and that's Kieran McManus. He was midfield for Tubber in their 116 to 1-7 win over Gracefield. This is the Offaly Junior or Senior B semi-final. But 47 years of age and still lording a midfield. That's some going.
It's unbelievable. We're kind of used to, I don't know, there's no cap obviously in what age you stop playing for your club, but generally is it kind of, I don't know, understand it that it's kind of like being kind of early 40s as most as we've seen kind of guys impacting at the top level, But yeah, that's absolutely unbelievable what he's done. I love the line in I think it was the Offaly Independent. Excuse me if I've actually got the local media wrong, but I think it was about he conserved his energy around the midfield area.
Was it the Offaly Express?
Offaly Express, sorry, but conserved his energy. I thought that was great that he obviously has maybe someone alongside him to kind of do the running, but also was still able to impact with his kick passing into the attack and obviously play balls. Like he was absolutely magic to watch in the 90s, 2000s with his ability to kind of put over 45 or unbelievable guys well from what I recall to get a goal. Not just standard, toe poking in from 2 yards, but kind of 20-yard shots into the top corner and that sort of thing. But getting 5 points in a county quarter-final at any level at the age of 47 is fair going. Let alone that it's senior, the second grade inside. So obviously, I presume, I don't know, every winter has there been this thing, are you hanging up the boots or not? But pretty incredible that he's kept going.
Yeah, absolutely outrageous stuff from him there. I suppose in the Galway Championship, Corofin did win their first couple of games. So had Moy Cullen. So something had to give when they met over the weekend. But Corofin were obviously this dominant team, the first ever to do the 3 in a row of All Irelands. But they lost this game again. They obviously were beaten well enough by Mountbellew in the final last year. So that must be a bit of a dent to their confidence.
Yeah, it's just interesting, I guess, is the aura kind of gone a little bit. I mean, they had such a stranglehold over Galway for so long. Well, they had that grip on the whole country, when you're winning 3 in a row national, and then was it 5 Connachts. But the Galway thing, the fact that they'd won the 7 in a row, Mountbellew obviously decided to beat them in the semi-final and final. But I remember thinking 2 years ago when Mountbellew, they finally got over the line against Corofin, but then it was Moy Cullen beat them in the final. So obviously a very, very kind of well-regarded side in terms of, if you look at the guys in Pádraig Joyce's squad coming along with the Kellys and Owen Gallagher from Antrim, who's kind of involved in as well, and Deise Keneally. So, a strong side in their own right, county champions from the last 2 years. And just when you kind of look at the 3 groups in Galway, I mean, Corofin are now third in their group, but Tuam Stars and Moy Cullen both have a 100% record ahead of them. Mountbellew then obviously have been leading the way in Group 2. This is supposed to be a brilliant match actually between them and Salthill and Knocknacarra. Someone was telling me that it was live streamed live and it was like a really high quality game. And then Midleton are top of Group 3. It just has a look of a bit of a wider open championship, a bit more unpredictable. And in fairness, while Corofin were winning, there was definitely a good few years. Tuam Stars took them to replay once, Mountbellew did. So they had some county finals where they were winning it comfortably. But there are instances in these kind of, counties where one side is kind of ruling over them all, that they have 1 or 2 big tests every year. And I'd notice that kind of feeds your hope that you're kind of not too far away. You were obviously talking earlier, you and Naoise, about the Waterford hurling championship, but you were thinking last year, Mount Sion ran Ballygunner to within 2 points. So there is kind of once or twice a year, is there a game that happens that kind of give you enough hope that you can kind of topple the Kings? And obviously in Galway, it's happened, Corofin have been toppled. I mean, they're still in a good place. I think a good contention. I think it's the top 2 from each of the 3 groups go through and the best third place team. So I mean, they're third at the moment. They still have 2 more games to play. So still in a good position to be hopeful for them, I suppose, to get into the knockout stages. But it is interesting, that kind of sense of competitiveness that seems to be there now with different teams as well fancying their chances.
I suppose I was away for the last week and a half, but what it was, the Kevin McStay, he was announced as the new Mayo manager going forward. And he had spoken in the past how he was retired from intercounty football management after leaving Roscommon. So I was kind of surprised to see his name back in the mix. But I suppose when it was there and the opportunity to apply for it came along, and I suppose, he's a Mayo man and he, he fancies the challenge, or he has done, probably hard to turn it down. But what are your thoughts on it? And also, we talked earlier about how, there's not that many managers out there that have already proven that they can do it at intercounty level. He has done it, but it's interesting that, it's a 60-year-old man, and I'm not being ageist, but I'm just saying it's a 60-year-old man who's also done a lot of TV punditry, who's in there. He's got a good CV too. And then on the other side of it, you have Colin O'Rourke, who's 64, who's, he's won titles with Simonstown as well. So, but it's kind of interesting that they've both gone for mega experienced men in a way, but they're also TV pundits.
It is, and you said that to hurling. I was kind of making a point last week with Davey and me, Donahue. It's like 4 people who were on the Sunday Game punditry team this year have all gone into county management jobs for next year, He was, I don't know if you ever read his book when he thought it was kind of memoir of his time in charge of Roscommon, but it was quite interesting. He basically talked about it was time to get off the comfort of the punditry chair and get onto the sideline and test myself and see could I do it. But he essentially said at the end of that book that, as you said, he was retired and that he wasn't going to go for it again. Because I hadn't realised till last week, I knew he kind of went for it very publicly around 2015. But he also applied, I was listening to John Casey on another podcast, he went for it in 1996 when he had been involved in the under-21 team. I mean, that's 26 years ago. Didn't get it then. And I suppose, as you said, like the fact that 26 years later, you think maybe, okay, the chance is gone, but no more than O'Rourke, I wonder, was it just a box he wanted to tick in his life and something that he craved? And in fairness, he does seem to have kept himself incredibly relevant in terms of upskilling, in terms of his coaching success. And I mean, to win the All-Ireland Club at St. Bridget's was a huge, huge achievement. But then I think, to get a Connacht title out of Roscommon and to keep them very, very competitive for those couple of years, I think that was very, very impressive going. Didn't always go great for them. Obviously, I know sometimes in Croke Park against some of the teams they were faced, but okay, I know they got annihilated in the replay by Mayo in 2017, but they did draw with them in the quarterfinal, and they were still like, they're kind of that yo-yo side between Division 2 and Division 1, but still probably a top 10 side in the country consistently over that time. So I think he does a lot of credit for that. I suppose, I was kind of surprised initially that he was kind of coming back into the mix. But again, I suppose maybe the opportunity had arisen and he had put together a pretty impressive management team. I mean, to me, one of the most fascinating elements of this is the presence of Stephen Rochford in the management team. I mean, the guy who probably went closer than anyone when you look at the 16-17, this is probably a debate that like no Mayo person wants to enter it into, but I've done it a couple of times with different friends of mine. Which was the year that Mayo went closest? I suppose last year against Tyrone, the fact that they'd beaten Dublin is one that's brought up, but definitely across the 16-17 finals when Waterford was in charge. But to be that manager then, but then to go back in, but not to be the number one main guy. But maybe that's the way Rochford wants to go now. The fact that he's kind of into Donegal as coaching, maybe that's the way. I mean, it's interesting. He would have managed against Max Day those couple of times. I mean, there's different pictures being brought up last week. Someone who's appointed of the post-match kind of discussion. I think it was an FBD League game in Kiltoom, the two of them walking across the pitch together. Presume they know each other a long time. Quite interesting that he got him on board. Lee McHale, I suppose, is his kind of right-hand man, and they've always kind of come as almost a package deal and working with various teams. Donny Buckley is obviously a coach of huge renown. And then Damien Mulligan, I think, is an interesting one. Throw in a local upcoming coach who did a lot of good work last year with getting Balmullet to the county final. And it's interesting that McHale actually replaced him at club level. McHale is currently managing Balmullet in the championship. I mean, I suppose I'm focusing here on the backroom team. And again, this is something myself and Bernie discussed last week, but this is the element that was just most fascinating in this Mayo thing. That everything was so out in the open with the backroom teams, the identity of it. Like if you compare it to how Kilkenny and Dublin hurling did it, that literally it was just, here's the announcement, here's the manager. And I know there was a gap between Derek Ling being appointed and here's his management team, but just didn't seem as much fuss, or maybe not much fuss, as much coverage. But then maybe this is the fact that Mayo is just one of the most sought after and kind of most high profile jobs in the county. But like there's so many fascinating elements to it. Like you've touched on some of them there, the TV thing. is there an element like, you know, I thought he was a very interesting pundit. Like, he didn't hold back and kind of stuff he said and all that. And I don't think there was anything too, you know, controversial that he has to say or whatever. Or, you know, if there's any kind of, I'm not suggesting there's bridges need to be mended or whatever, but it is interesting that he's gone from, you know, he had an Irish Times column every week as well. And the RTE gig, he kind of fitted back into them after his Roscommon time. And now he's gone back in with Mayo. But
yeah,
I'm guessing it was a driving force for him, that he just really wanted this job at some stage in his life.
Yeah, there's a lot to chew on there. I'm even thinking, like, sometimes you can see some guys who have been managers and probably feel like they will go back into it again. When they're doing punditry, they don't always say what they think, and they kind of say whatever, just a bit of a PR exercise in a way for them to keep their names out there, but also not to put any noses out of joint. In terms of Mayo, the year they got closest, I think it has to be 2017, the year of the red card in the final. But look, they were close a number of times. And I think 2021 against Tyrone, that no-show performance was the worst of the lot. And then one other point to mention about the fact that I've mentioned that they're a little bit older. Because McStay is retired, and you know, the whole Stephen Rochford point. Like, I remember talking to Stephen Rochford one of the years when he was over Mayo, and he was telling me that he was, you know, I think he was driving from home up to maybe Dublin or something like that. And because he was on the phone constantly, as you have to be as a manager, because of, you know, you hear about 40 hours of commitment a week, his phone had died by the time he'd gotten halfway up the country. So maybe for Rochford, the fact that, you know, he's probably juggling work, young family, all that kind of stuff, maybe being a coach is a more workable way for him to stay involved. And I've heard other coaches saying that you actually get to enjoy the sport more because you're involved in the coaching rather than dealing and delegating all the time. So maybe in some ways it suits McStay's lifestyle that, you know, maybe he has the time to do that. Whereas for Rochford, maybe the coaching works best for him.
I think you hit the nail on the head there in both respects. And I think this year's All-Ireland final provides evidence of that. In terms of retired manager, it's something Jack O'Connor has said repeatedly. Like, I was down at the pre-match press conference before the All-Ireland final in Kilkenny, and he was asked, you know, what's the difference between this and your first and second stints in charge? And he goes, the time involved, it's gone to another level. And I'm just lucky that I'm retired and I have the energy and I have the time to do this. Like, even he talked about something when he started as manager, maybe McStay might do this, that Jack O'Connor drove around the county and met every single player, Kerry player, in their home area. So none of them had to travel to meet him, and they weren't doing these meetings in Kilkenny, that he went and met them. And he said he had the time to do that, devoted to last winter. So I think there's definitely an element of that the time commitments and all that. I mean, you know, you look at Brian Cody, obviously, the huge success he enjoyed. He was retired as well. You know, it is a huge factor. The coaching element, Cian O'Neill is one that springs to mind. He spoke about it, I think, when he got involved with Cork first, and then later with Galway. In terms of comparing it to his experience with Kildare, he said it was sold to him. You can basically strip away all the other stuff where just, you know, the necessary things like dealing with the county board and the media and ringing every single player. Like, your sole job is to get on the training pitch at night, plan out that session, get the players in the best possible shape. Like you say, you're working on, you know, improving a guy's right foot or a kick-out strategy or something like that. You don't have to worry about kind of all the different sort of issues and the dealings with all these sort of stakeholders. So maybe that suits Rochford as well, you know, time commitments and all that, you know, that there is an element to that just because he had the taste of management, you know, maybe it wasn't all that he wanted to do, and he probably maybe more enjoys kind of what he's getting to work on now. So all told, it's a pretty fascinating one. But I suppose the example is Kerry, in terms of, can you cope with, you know, this phrase, there's too many number ones there. I mean, Kerry was very interesting this year. You basically had 3 county managers from the 2021 season involved with Kerry, in O'Connor, the Kildare boss, Cork, the Laois boss, and Tally, the Down boss. And then obviously Dermot Murphy, very experienced. And I guess, like any coaching setup, Shane, like, once you kind of clearly define this is your role and this is your role, and once everyone knows that and everyone is happy to kind of stick with that, you know, it obviously has been proven that it can work.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the results from round 4 of the Longford Football Championship, and by the way, Paddy Christie, I should say, is the new county boss there, so he would have taken in some of the action from the weekend, I'm sure. Mullinachta beat Longford Slashers 2-13 to 1-4, hefty enough. Columkill, they beat Carrick Edmond 15 points to 2-7, and Abilara drew with Kilo. So Mullinachta's demolition job of Slashers was noteworthy, because it would have been tipped to be close enough, with many thinking Mullinachta are on their last legs, but a bit of a statement of intent there. And second favourites for the championship, Kilo, they're on the brink of elimination. with a win, a draw, and 2 losses so far, and they need at least a draw against their arch rivals, their neighbours, Clongich, this Friday night to secure a quarter-final place. And Dramard, they also cruised to an easy win over Granard and are living up to many people's tag of dark horses. They face Mullinachta this weekend to decide who tops that group. In Down, knockout format there. What are your thoughts on the knockout and backdoor system there? Kilcoo obviously defending their All-Ireland Championship. They beat Clonduff 2-12 to 4 points at the weekend. Jeez, it's not that long since, while I was away, I saw that video of the huge brawl in that league match against the Burn. And not ideal for Conor Laverty. He's obviously taken over the county team. And look, I'm not really sure how involved he was in the brawl. I saw him skirting around the edges anyway. But geez, that's the last thing you want to be close to when you're a county manager.
Yeah, it's a bit of a messy one, and it's sure something you probably want to try and avoid. I'm not really sure what the fallout has been from it, but obviously it was one of these things. In the social media age, we're getting more exposure to these sort of things when there is, someone says sometime autumn in the GA is not just county final season, it's brawl season, that there's always a couple of every year. But yeah, it's something that it's a bit of a messy one for him, I suppose, when he's so kind of immersed in club football still himself and playing in a, kind of a small pocket, relatively speaking, population-wise, when kind of clubs right next to each other, and obviously Kilcoo have been so successful that they are the one that everyone wants to take down now this year, Like the knockout format is interesting. As far as I know, similar thing is happening in Tyrone. I mean, the Tyrone Championship isn't starting until the Thursday, the 22nd of September. I think that's the correct date, but it's that weekend anyway, which seems unbelievable when you consider that'll be about 7 weeks after the Wexford Hurling Championship finished completely. But then they just have a different system where the league games are priority so big up there, and obviously the Down League is obviously pretty serious as well. When you see that kind of level of kind of I suppose passion and emotion, is that the way we'll put it on show, that they're going for that sort of format. The league is taken hugely seriously, and then they don't mind only getting two goals at the championship. I know certainly in other counties the league doesn't have the same kind of status. Kerry football is probably taken pretty seriously as well, in Kilkenny hurling, but maybe that's the reason why it's working out for them, that they have the kind of knockout format, whereas like Tip and Cork, for example, as we've seen the last couple of years, they've gone for the 14 group formats, and they've gone for that. Kerry actually are bringing that in this year, which is the first time they've done for the county championship. They're going group format. Beforehand, it was just 2 chances basically, first round straight through, and then obviously a backdoor for the losers. But they've gone for something different this year as well. Yeah,
I like the Dublin Hurling Championship system, which is groups of 5. The top team in each group gets to the semi-final. Second and third play each other from the opposing groups, and then fourth and fifth, it's the same thing as well. Fourth from one will play fifth from the other, and 2 go down. So pretty much every single game, something's riding on it, and probably going into the last game, we'll see situations where a team could either be into relegation or into a quarter final. So I kind of like that, I have to say. A reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get maybe this class Clare jersey or any of the other ones that are on display on the website, use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. Also, the OurGame coaching clinic is coming to UCD on Friday, September 17th, 7:30 p.m. If you want to look up the poster there on my Twitter, @Shane Saint, you can scan the QR code or click the link there. It's going to be a great evening with Martin Fogarty, Kieran Kerry and Matty Kenny, all taking sessions with players, and it's going to be a brilliant event. So do join us for that, because it's going to be in person only. The Kildare, I'll just run through a couple of more results. Kildare Senior Football Championship preliminary quarterfinals. Sarsfields beat Moorfield 2-11 to 10 points, and Eadstown beat St. Lawrence's 3-13 to 116. In the Armagh football preliminary round, I thought this was an interesting one. The county goalkeeper scored a hat-trick, but it's a little bit misleading because Ethan Rafferty is a quality forward. But Madden Rapparees still beat his Grange 2-12 to 3-5. Some job scoring a hat-trick in a game, isn't it? No matter what level it is.
Yeah, and he was absolutely magic to watch this year in the inter-county level. And I mean, the debate over that kind of a keeper role, are they adding value? I always would have thought that he was the undisputed example this year of a guy who completely understood what he was doing and was able to impact so greatly. And it's probably kind of forgotten about with the way it turned out with the penalty shooter win for Galway, but it was his setup, I think, for Jamar Hall, what could have been the winning point in extra time, but he was just brilliant to watch. And obviously you can see that he has, very, very comfortable kind of skills from playing outfield and all that, and he's very kind of comfortable on the ball. Whereas I guess other players were a little bit, I suppose, caught out of possession a couple of times this year, in terms of leaving the goal vacant and that kind of thing, So, yeah, it is, when you say goalkeeper scores hat-trick, all right, as you said, it is a little bit misleading when you actually reveal the identity of the player involved.
Yeah. Is there any other games I'm going to run through a few more results, but is there anything else in particular that has stood out to you over the weekend that you want to talk about?
I think we've pretty well covered there. Like I said, I think it's going to definitely in the next week or two going to get kind of cracking now in terms of we're going to get the quarterfinal and semi-final stage. I'm kind of a better idea of it. I guess just one thing is that the TG Car live games next weekend, Dublin Club football, Kilkenny Crokes v Temple Oaks Queen Street, I think, and Coola v Ballymun. Interesting games in their own right, the Coola Ballymun, but to me, I'd say all eyes are going to be on two players. One, whether Shane Walsh starts with Kilkenny or not, and two, the fact that it's live on TV, and given all the games he missed this year for Dublin, I know he was very good in the last game, but club game, but for a wider audience to see Conor Callaghan play, I think there'll be a good bit of interest in that. And I think that's a winner takes all game against Ballymun, so that'll be pretty interesting. But yeah, I'd say the team sheet for the first game will be fairly well scrutinised whenever it's released on Sunday. Yeah,
like, can you see Kilmacud being beaten this year? Like, when they have the full strength team out with both Paul Mannion and Shane Walsh, how do you beat that?
Yeah, I mean, that's like they're still winning their games anyway. I think they only won their last game by 4 points, but I don't know, Dublin Championship, like, it's always, there's an argument that they should have lost last year's county final. St. Jude's had that there, and it was a goal, I think, from Cian O'Connor to kind of change the flow of that game. There's always just one or two teams, like, Ballyboden always seem to come every couple of years. Ballymun on paper still have a huge amount to offer. I know they only won the senior two last year, but Coola on paper have a huge amount to offer with the kind of some of the players that they have at their disposal that are kind of familiar names, So, but I think it'll be very interesting to see what they do with them. Where do you play them in the forward line? What sort of roles do they take? Is it a two-man full forward line? Do you have one out and one in, or do they swap in between? When they get them both back, so if they get the chance to play Walsh from the start. And in fairness as well, they did prove last year in the team that got to the Ireland final, it was very different to the team of, say, that would have won the Ireland Club in 2009. It was a completely homegrown unit, and they had a lot of very young players like Tom Fox, Dan O'Brien, different guys in different games. Callum Pearson were kind of chipping in with points. So some of those guys could completely take off now if all the attention is on the kind of Walsh Mannion double act.
They absolutely could. Okay, well, brilliant stuff, Fintan. We'll be chatting to you again soon.
No worries, Shane. Talk to you soon.
Okay, so there's plenty of other results from the weekend that I'm going to run through here. In Antrim, Naomh Wirra, they beat lost to Naomh Breed by 110 to 114. Money Glass, they were beaten by Roger Case and Port Glenone, 224 to 17. Ahagallen beat Randallstown by 413 to 15. O'Donovan Rossa won 12. Carrigan 14 points. Naomh Owen, Creggan drew, and St. Gall's and Lough Jarrag, they also drew. There's a huge amount of results, and I'm not sure that I'll go and read them all, but there's nearly too many to go through at this point. So that's pretty much it from the show today. If you have any more comments, get them in there as quickly as possible and read them out. As I'm just reminding you that once again, the show is brought to you by orgaretro.com, and you can use the promo code OurGame to get 15% off. Also a reminder that we are really excited about this coaching clinic that's coming up in UCD on the 16th of September at 7:30 p.m. It's going to be brilliant. It's only 40 quid in, and it's Maddie Kenny, Kieran Kerry, Martin Fogarty giving you all the insights in terms of coaching teams, what you should be doing and what you should be looking to do if you wanted to bring your hurling team or your camogie team onto the next level. So you can go and get the tickets. Go to my Twitter there, @ShaneSaint, and there's still some tickets available, but I would be suggesting you get in soon because we can only fit so many at it. Thanks very much, and we'll see you all again on Thursday at the Patreon show, patreon.com/OurGame.